in the country you are. And welcome to our webinar this morning. And we're delighted to have you here to talk about this really important subject. And in a minute, we're going to introduce our moderator and our panelists. But I thought first I would actually talk a little bit about the sort of genesis of this webinar and how this came about. So I'm Paul Johnson. I'm the president and founder of Creative Fundraising Advisors, and we are a full service fundraising consulting firm. We work with organizations across the country in all parts of the nonprofit sector. And we work on campaign planning, strategic planning, sort of a full service fundraising consulting firm. And we recently had the experience where we were hired to work on a very big project with a client that is a national client. And we went through the process of submitting a proposal and being engaged by that client to work on this very large project. And after our engagement, we were introduced to the rest of the staff of this client. And I then got a call from the client saying, the staff has a little bit of an issue with the fact that we have hired 3 white men to work on this project. And we are hoping that you can add a person of color to your staff to work on this project because DEI is such a huge priority for this organization. And my initial response was, yes, of course we can do that. I'm happy to do that. And that it will be easy to find somebody to join our team. And I actually didn't realize how hard it was going to be. And part of the reason I didn't realize how hard it was going to be was because of my own implicit bias around this issue. As we started looking in our regular channels for somebody to join our team, the answer that I kept getting from my regular sort of network and channels was, there are not people of color who work in development that are quote unquote qualified to do this. And so I will admit, and I've admitted to our very distinguished panel here, that I started off on the wrong foot here. And so I needed to get on the right foot with this. And so we very happily work with Lisa Tabor, who's our moderator today. And Lisa runs an organization here in the Twin Cities called CultureBrokers, and she works with all kinds of organizations on DEI consulting. And so I went to Lisa and I said, I need your help here because we are very, as a company, interested in expanding our group of consultants to include people of color, and we definitely want to support our client in this issue, but I'm obviously doing something wrong here. So I need your help. So with Lisa, we rewrote the job description actually, and she pointed us in various places that it would never even occur to me to look at. And one of the places that we actually discovered was the African American Development Officers Association. And I also didn't realize that there is something called Black LinkedIn, which I was completely unaware of. And so my bias actually was keeping me in a lane that prevented me from actually being really effective at creating diversity within my own company. So I then came to the conclusion that if I have a problem with this issue, that other people probably have a problem with this issue too. So that's the genesis of this conversation. Before we also dive into this too, I just wanted to call everybody's attention to the Q&A function. If you have questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A function, which I will be monitoring, and then I will pose the questions during the course of this. So I just wanted to share that. And then before we dive in, I wanted to share this, just this quick slide with you. So why does this matter? You know, why are we investigating this, and why does this matter? And the data that I'm about to show you has actually been pulled from 2 different studies. One was done by an organization called Cause Effect in 2018. And the study was called Money, Power, and Race, the lived experience of fundraisers of color. And the other was a study done by the Indiana University Lilly School of Philanthropy in 2017 called Fundraisers in the 21st Century. And so I just pulled this very brief information. Why does this matter? One is that fundraising is where the narrative of an organization is shaped. Development professionals create the language that describes the problem, solutions, and vision for change. Two, fundraising manages the external relationships of nonprofits. Development professionals are entrusted with representing their institutions to individuals with the ability to make game-changing difference in their constituents' future. Three, fundraising is the nexus where money comes into the organization, carrying with it the power to bestow resources and enable programming. And four, donors of color are a rising philanthropic asset for the nonprofit sector. And they seem especially responsive to being approached by fundraisers of color. And one quote from this study that Cause Effect did that really struck me was, being in development gives you a seat at the table when it comes to setting the direction for your organization. You're at the heart of what the funding issues are, what the budget issues are, and how you create solutions based on resources and strategy. For this to be an equitable conversation, development professionals of color must be in the room where these conversations happen. And then a statistic that I just found really revealing that I think is going to set the tone for our conversation, that when the Lilly School of Philanthropy did this study about fundraisers in the 21st century, they surveyed 37,000 development professionals across the country. And in that, what they discovered was it's estimated that 12% of development professionals in this country are people of color, of 37,000 people that were surveyed. So with that, I am going to hand our panel over to our distinguished moderator and panelists. So Lisa, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Tabor. I'm the owner of CultureBrokers. As Paul said, we specialize in helping organizations get results from their diversity, inclusion, and racial equity activities. And Paul, you are not the only organization that has started off on the wrong foot before, but you are one of the few that I've found that is humble enough to recognize it early and help bring someone else in who can help. So kudos there, and I'm thrilled that AJ was one of the folks that was hired on. And yes,
right, I forgot that part. I forgot the punchline. The punchline was, we hired AJ Casey, who's one of our panelists this morning, and we actually found AJ through the African American Development Officers Association. So sorry, I forgot the punchline.
That is okay. Better late than never, right? So I'm thrilled to be able to moderate this panel, which this is actually going to be more like a roundtable conversation. I'll start off the conversation with some questions for each of our panelists, but I've already encouraged our panelists to ask each other questions as well, and to continue to elaborate on any issues that have come up that they want to continue, that they want to explore with each other. So it's a little bit of a fishbowl here. However, as Paul said, as you're listening to our panelists, or you already have any questions, please drop them into the Q&A. There's one thing that I do want to prepare you for, dear audience, and that is that that I've encouraged our panelists to be authentic, straightforward, and to share their experiences, as well as, of course, what they think is wrong, or what are problems, as well as what are solutions. So we're assuming that you are here because you are already motivated to make some change, to make the improvement in your organization or in your field as fundraisers, fund developers, and that we're not going to try to sell you on the idea of doing that. You're here to improve, and we're going to respect that. But a little bit of a warning that you may hear some things that are gonna, as my colleague Earl Ross says, make you feel a certain way. And so please lean in to that. Recognize, you know, if your heartbeat races or you're starting to feel defensive, take a moment and just accept what you're hearing, because you will not be able to make change until you do that. So with that, my panelists are prepped to be authentic. We're looking for them to share what they know about the problem or see as the problem, root causes to what is considered to be the pipeline problem, and then offer solutions. So we're going to start with the roundtable. I will ask some questions of our panelists, and before I do, I will quickly introduce them. We're talking with AJ Casey, who is of counsel for Creative Fundraising Advisors out of Cincinnati, right? Cincinnati, Ohio. Birgit Smith-Burton, who is the Executive Director of Foundation Relations at Georgia Institute of Technology. And she's also founder of the African American Development Officers Network out of Atlanta, correct? Yes. Sunanda Ghosh, who is Director of Strategic Growth at the Redford Center in Philadelphia. Yes. And William Harris, President and CEO of Space Center Houston in Texas. And William, we are, Texas is in our thoughts and good wishes to everyone. That's quite a circumstance that you have. And of course, for those of us in Minnesota, we're used to it, but I totally feel the devastation that has happened in your community. And again, great best wishes there. So let's jump in. AJ, Paul said that he was able to find and hire you through this through the efforts of making changes to their job description and reaching into different networks and whatnot. As a professional in the fund development field, you have helped clients raise millions of dollars. You have many years of experience. You represent the deep end of the pool of talent that obviously clearly exists. So why do you think it's hard for most nonprofit organizations to find you and your colleagues?
Right. Well, I thank you for that wonderful introduction and for allowing me to be a part of this great panel. Thank you. Yeah, I think, you know, like you said, we're only about 12% of the national pool of professional fundraisers, at least according to the data that we have right now. And so I think that it can be difficult to find where we are, but we are definitely here. I was a participant in a case conference recently, and we had a gathering where there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people of color who are professional fundraisers in the higher education realm. And so we're here. I just don't think that it has always been a priority to find people of color to work in the fundraising profession. And then like Paul's experience, people don't know where to go or who to turn to find professional help. And so now, by raising this issue and bringing light to this, I'm hoping that organizations like the AADO and all the other organizations that support fundraisers who are people of color will be more in the spotlight, so people will know where to find us.
Great, thank you. And so now, Birgit, both AJ and Paul said that you were the link for them meeting each other. Your organization provides support to 3,000 members. What are the other kinds of challenges you're hearing from them that can help our audience better understand the root causes behind this pipeline challenge? Oh, you're on mute, sweetie. Yeah.
I'm that person. Thank you for having me. So I first want to note that in addition to the statistic, which was 12% of fundraisers who completed that survey were people of color, the Association of Fundraising Professionals note that 4% of those 30,000 members of AFP are African Americans. So let's, bring that number down to an even smaller percentage. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics predicts that fundraising is the fastest growing, among the fastest, if not the fastest growing profession between 2018 and 2028. So it's up to those in the leadership roles with credibility and visibility in the industry, black and white, to work at transforming this industry and bringing more people of color in. So with that little bit of background, here are a couple of things that the AABO members note when they, voice their concerns, that often when they make it to the top 2 to 3 and not the final, specifically for leadership opportunities, VP for development or chief development officer, executive director. A good friend of mine, Dr. Juan Gruder, who's in the profession, said that the organization does not see your face as the face of fundraising or top leadership. And that's pretty simple. They have to be able to see your face as that face that's going out representing the highest level of that organization. And oftentimes it comes down to that. You can be a qualified candidate. They just aren't ready to see your face. They often hear that the hiring organization, as AJ just commented on, can't find candidates. They're not widening their networks. The AABO case, which is Council for Advancement and Support of Education conference on diverse philanthropy and leadership, we have 350 people, 250 to 350. 30% of the people that come are allies because they're looking to network and to learn more about people of color in the profession. And until recently, AADO members have complained that they don't see the opportunities. So, thank you, Paul, for posting on AADO. And currently we have 400 jobs on the AADO website. But another one of my friends said that you can't post and pray, right? Post and then pray. I had someone post a job on a Friday afternoon, I tell you no lie, at 5 o'clock, and she was emailing me Monday morning saying, well, nobody's applied. I was like, okay, since Friday to Monday. And then I won't talk about where this job was, but she was really expecting somebody to move to a really remote area to work at a very small private school. So you have to manage those expectations and also understand that you post and people see that you're posting. And even if you don't get many applications or even one, our membership recognizes that you're making the effort. And then the last 2 things I'll say is not recognizing talent or the skill set outside of just the numbers. I understand that it's fundraising, right? But when I worked for the United Negro College Fund, that $1 million I had to raise annually was the hardest $1 million I have ever raised. And now with a team, we bring in 20 to 30 million a year. I still say that $1 million was the hardest. And you need to take a chance on these people that can demonstrate that they're talented, they have the skill set, and not just based on the numbers that they brought in at maybe an organization or an institution that doesn't even compare in size to where you want them to come. And then lastly, looking to hire, people with talented and not just what you see reflected in the mirror. You can have a conversation and feel like you really connect. AJ and I can get in the room and she can make me feel like she's the perfect one, because there are other things that we connect on, but not just her talent or what she brings to the table. So we make that mistake, hiring what we see in the mirror. So those are some of the complaints that we hear from our membership.
Wow, great. Well, not great, of course, but thank you for that insight. And I noticed that there was a lot about networking and connections. And so, Sananda, great segue to you. You've worked in the field. You've worked your way up from associate to coordinator to officer to director, and you've worked in a variety of organizations, from arts, education to housing. And I dare say you got there not just because of your talent and expertise and professionalism, but also because of a network, right? Most of us get our jobs because of our networks. So how hard was that for you to do? And what does our audience need to know to make it easier?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, for me, I feel like I was very lucky. I had a lot of mentors who really helped me along the way. And as Birgit was just saying, you know, if you're not just looking at the numbers, but you're looking at how people are wired, how they can build relationships, I think it's a great opportunity for people to mentor younger staff, or maybe they're not fundraising staff, but they could be. So I think that there's an opportunity to bring people under your wing and kind of really help them and help them navigate this field that is a very white field. I'm not gonna lie, there were moments that I was very lonely, and you know, I'd go to fundraising conferences and I'd be one of the only people of color there, and so whenever I would see another person of color, I would gravitate towards them. But I think one way that organizations can really make their space more inviting to people of color is a lot of times as people of color are walking into very white spaces, but change the culture internally. So hire more people of color in all departments, and especially in leadership positions, because you will definitely get more applicants of color that way. So I do feel like there's some ways that we can shift the culture and make, you know, our spaces more inviting.
Thank you. And William, last but certainly not least, because I think you have maybe the broadest experience and longest experience for maybe some of us, but you've got more than 30 years in the fundraising field, and now you're most recently the senior most leader of Space Center Houston. So you have this deep understanding of the subject, of course, but also a nice broad view of how the institution plays a role, how leadership plays a role. So what have you learned about the institutional structures, the policies, the practices, and how leaders themselves play a part in all of these things that the panelists have shared so far?
Well, I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's institutionalized. And so we're having to change culture. And as you've heard from other panelists, you can have a policy, but if you don't operationalize it, if you don't build it into the DNA of the organization, you're not going to have true change. And you can be very successful at attracting candidates, but are you successful at retaining them in those roles? And so as you've heard, you've got to really create structural change in the organization to make it a welcoming organization and a welcoming place where people can thrive. So you have to be sure that you not only have the policies in place, because we've had DEIA policies for 40 years. I mean, that's not anything that's new, but we really haven't moved the dial in so many ways. If you look at the level of the board participation, if you look at executive leadership and other rank and file staff in an organization, if you don't consciously address this and put in place structures to enable people to thrive and be successful, you're not going to retain those kind of candidates. I know recently in my recruitment efforts at Space Center Houston, I've had 2 candidates who wanted to speak to me directly, even though they weren't my direct reports, about how were we walking the talk of DEIA before they considered joining the organization, because they did not want to join an organization that didn't align with their values or a place where they felt they could thrive. And fortunately, we were able to address that with them, and they both came to work with us. So they were great recruits. So I would say again that really focus on the culture of your organization, how you make it different. And then also you've got to have in place practices to address when the staff members who are there deal with unconscious bias or other issues with donors and stakeholders and others who may say offensive things or do offensive things. That cannot be tolerated. And the leadership has to have the back of all of those staff and employees, and especially the fundraisers of the organization.
William, I think that's a hugely important subject that I want to interrogate a little bit further with the group, but I also want to go back to, if you don't mind, this discussion of sort of how important it is institutionally that this be a priority, because as we were talking about in our prep for this panel, you know, those of you who are on the webinar and all of us who are development professionals know that there are very few departments within an organization that touch every other department like the development office does. You know, we seem to interact with departments much more than other departments do. Development is not siloed within an organization, right? And so if we make an effort in a development office to hire people of color, to diversify our staff, we have to make sure that they're actually coming into an institution that is welcoming and inclusive, right? It can't just be the development office that's welcoming and inclusive. And so it really needs to start at the board level, right? And it needs to go all the way throughout the institution. And I hope people, the four of you, can talk about this. And I wanted just to remind, or not remind people, but in some of the work that we've been doing around board building and diversifying boards, one of the shocking statistics that we found in our research, and this was a study done by BoardSource, is that in 2017, and I don't think this number has changed much in the last 4 years, 84% of nonprofit boards were entirely white. 84% of nonprofit boards were entirely white. So that's where the problem starts, I think. But I wonder if the four of you or five of you could talk about that. Go ahead, Birgit.
So yeah, and they're over 40 and they're white men. So the majority. Here's the thing, for a board to become more diverse, somebody's got to go. And who wants to raise their hand and go, especially when you've got a board that is filled with passionate board members who have been long time, people who've been involved a long time with the organization. When they sit around in a board retreat with a facilitator to talk about, we need more diversity on this board. If you have a board limit of 25 people and you have 25 people sitting around the table, 4 people have to go. And oftentimes boards are, social opportunities around a given passion and interest. And so it's hard for people to let go of that, their involvement and that commitment.
Right. And another thing that Sunanda and William both brought up about changing the organizational culture, hiring people of color and giving those opportunities, it's more than saying, okay, now we've got people of color who are, spread throughout the organization, we're going to update our organizational culture, because that is a whole lot easier said than done. And Paul, your experience in not knowing where the networks are to find professionals of color, the same kind of social missteps happen within organizations. People don't know what they don't know. They don't know how to change the culture. They don't know what parts of the culture people of color, or maybe limiting people of color's access. They don't, there are these kind of societal norms of how fundraising works. There are these cultural and, political kind of expectations of the way the organization exists in the country, exists in its community. And so when you start trying to change the organizational culture, you're still bumping up against these long-standing expectations of how things are supposed to work and how people are supposed to behave. And so it's a lot easier said than done. And so, I salute, Lisa, your work at CultureBrokers and you're doing at AADO, because the work is not just about putting bodies in seats. It truly is part of a complete social change, a complete paradigm shift in how we do business and how we interact with each other. And that goes from, how we treat people, how they wear their hair, how they, the clothes they want to wear, or the clothes that they are very comfortable wearing, to how we interact and interface with donors, donors who come from very different cultural and social backgrounds than the development staff who interface with them on a regular basis. So there's a lot to do, and it takes everybody understanding that this isn't just about putting bodies in seats, colored bodies in seats. It really does have to do with how we see the world, and how we're going to change to address to bring in all people to the table.
Could I jump in with 2 points? One is, I think we're at a really incredible juncture of time where there's now much more recognition that dominant culture does not perceive that there has been an issue up until now.
Right.
Now the dominant culture recognizes that, wow, we are not allowing others to participate. And so I think there's a greater awareness. It's not about excluding anyone. It's about allowing people to join and participate. And this transition is going to take time. You can't all of a sudden fire a third of your staff and then bring on, you know, a more diverse staff. You have to kind of grow and make institutional change. And so you've got to put those practices and policies in place. I mean, something that I'm very big on and we're doing in my organization is you have to invest in staff development. So you have to put budget toward doing your awareness training, your harassment training, all of these best practices in an organization to ensure that it's healthy and thrives. And so, and this is the unconscious bias training is really important. So you've got to wake up your staff too. And it's really important that the dominant culture become aware and sensitive, because we can't all of a sudden create a society away from, right? We're all in this together, and we have to have people understand that this is adding to the quality of life for everyone by having different voices heard and participating. The second point that I wanted to make is that, you know, this really is a new world, and we really have to grasp the opportunity and moving forward with engaging people in new ways. But you've got to be very intentional in everything that you do with the organization and the recruitment. We all know this with board recruitment. We go to our board members and say, who do you know? Who can you help? And so people have their social circles. And if you look at demographic research, definitely younger people, younger generations are inclusive and mixed and much more open to others. And you're seeing much more multi-ethnic marriages and multiracial marriages. That's not the case with people in their 60s and 70s. I mean, society is evolving and changing. And so we have to be conscious of those social dynamics and how things are changing over time, but we can't let up in doing that work.
And as William said, I mean, you can't fire a third of your staff. So, you know, your leadership, you know, is homogenous, you know, looks a certain way. You can tee people up for opportunities. You can invite people who, you know, from diverse backgrounds that are on the team or that are coming into your organization to be a part of that stretch team that's working on that very visible project that's going to get attention and recognition. And there's this quiet sort of under the surface thinking that you have to lower the bar in order to provide opportunities for diversity. You know, well, okay, we'll expect less and we'll lower the bar, you know, from our, you know, high expectations and standards to provide opportunities for diversity on the team. That's got to go.
Here, can I ask a question about that or make a comment about that? Isn't the exact opposite true as well? Is that we feel like we have to lower the bar, and yet our expectations of that person of color are so much higher. Like they can't make mistakes. They can't make, you know, that we have a different set of expectations.
Yes, of
true
course.
or not true?
That is absolutely true. I mean, if you put a group of us together, if you put 5 of us together, this has happened at my job, you know, we've accidentally stumbled into a room together and we laugh and go, oh no, we're all together. I mean, people are gonna think we're plotting or something. You know, we laugh and talk about it, but we will say, you know, the truth is we've got to be 3, 4, 5 times better just to be, you know, accepted and valued. And that is the truth, and that is the reality. And I had an AABO member come to me who had applied for a job, and she was exceptional, not only in the interview, but on paper. And folks, the thing that upset her the most was that she said she put on a Chanel suit and wore little pearl earrings and straightened her hair to make sure, because she's very dark skinned and she was afraid showing up in that room as a dark skinned woman, if she didn't try to tone everything down to make, you know, the people interviewing her feel comfortable with her, that she might not get the opportunity. We shouldn't feel like that when we are a stellar candidate, you know, by our talent and our you know, expertise and you know, so I could take over the whole session. Sorry. Go ahead.
There are
Sunanda.
lots of good questions coming in.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to say that I wanted to agree with a lot of everything that everyone's saying here. And AJ, just going back to your comment about just changing the paradigm, there needs to be a huge shift, because this white dominant culture is what, forces us to dress in a certain way or assimilate in a certain way, and we shouldn't have to do that. And so I think it's a lot of work. It's going to be a long road, and it's not going to be solved in a year or in a season or after the quarantining. This is work that needs to be done. I'd love for us to just talk about what Birgit had mentioned about power and just making more room at the table. So if you want to make more room at the table for different voices, some folks got to give up their seat, so there's that too. And I'd love to think about that, because I do like being very inclusive and making sure everyone's a part of everything. But I would love to, talk more about just that power shift.
Yeah, actually, that's beautiful, because there was a question in chat about how the role of white professionals in stepping aside. So the idea that people can realize that they're maybe not the right fit for going forward, for helping maybe their organization get to that next level or expand, and that it is the opportunity then for others to step into that space. And in fact, a lot of the work that I do is, to be very honest, is trying to help people realize that. Right, especially the white leaders, people on boards, realize that there may be, because there's a gap in the organization being as effective as it could be, potentially. Like, they have to realize and be honest with themselves: is my holding a seat here actually potentially holding us back? And having them explore what can happen when the organization has greater capacity to be effective across cultures, and how that can really propel the organization forward. Many of them have chosen to step back and say, you know what, I want to open up my space to new board members. I am more than willing to step off the board as a decision maker and power broker, and use my decision making and power brokering in a different way, maybe as assisting the fund development group and making relationships.
They want you to speak their language, right? And they're consistently testing you to see if you understand their world, right? And so as a person of color, you're constantly trying to navigate that. I grew up in a world that doesn't look like your world. I didn't grow up disadvantaged. I didn't grow up poor and struggling and pulling up myself up by my bootstraps kind of a situation. But I still didn't grow up privileged, white, and male. And so I had a different kind of experience than some of these donors. And so so we have to keep in mind that we talk about power brokering. What seems normal, the way things ought to work, has been defined and perpetuated by men, and mostly white men. And I don't say that to, to be racist. It's just the way the world has been set up here in America. And then I want to say this, and I'll love to hear from the other panelists as well. People of color who are looking to get jobs as professional fundraisers or presidents of universities or presidents of major national museums, like the Houston Space Center, we're not doing it because we want to be the first person of color or the first pick whatever, it's the first woman to do that thing. We're doing it because we have career aspirations and we have dreams and we have goals for our lives and our families just as much as everybody else does. So we're not doing it to tick off a box. We're not doing it to tick off your box that, you now have a diverse team or you have a diverse staff. And so we want to be considered professionals and equal on every level, despite the fact that we can check off other boxes. So I think that we have to start looking at normality as the way we all see normality and not just the way it has been set up for hundreds of years here in the United States.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in to say, and I love what you just said, AJ, but you have to remember, as a fundraiser, you have to have confidence in yourself and who you are as a person, and you don't want to compromise your integrity in who you are. And then you have to use also the tools of the organization, where that's why you have board terms. People serve a certain number of years on a board. And some organizations are really bad about enforcing that, and they'll just have the same people continuing to serve for many, many years. That is a tool to help create transition in an organization. And then it's really appropriate for you to ask your manager or your leaders about, well, where do you stand on DEIA? And, and also express that you have career aspirations, that you want to be advanced, because human nature is we try to help people who have needs or express to us their desires and what they want. It's just how we function as human beings. But if your manager doesn't know that, he or she may not think of you for that promotion or for an opportunity or to send you to professional development. So be sure that you express that. I also had great mentors. I'm really fortunate that I early in my career worked in organizations where I had managers who were really conscious of advancing their teams and providing those opportunities to go to conferences, because sometimes conferences are held out for the more senior people in the organization and not the entry level or junior members of the team, where you often have more diversity among the rank and file. So be very proactive in expressing how you have career aspirations, that you have expectations of the organizations. And this is something that's not new to say, but choose your boss carefully. Really choose the people you want to work for and work with, and that they don't just view you as a worker that they want to keep in that role in the organization. Ask questions about what are the promotional opportunities, what are the advancement opportunities in this organization. I'm looking to make a real commitment. Are you going to make a commitment to me to help support me in advancing my career? Those are completely appropriate questions.
And William, part of that commitment is in mentoring. And you talked about giving opportunities, but mentoring is a very unique kind of opportunity, a very unique kind of development. There's a question about, especially as a white manager, cultivating people of color, fundraisers of color, how might they do that creatively around the issue of mentoring? And what are the thoughts about cross-cultural mentoring and versus, or in addition to, monocultural or homo, what? Yeah, that, you know what I mean? Monocultural mentoring. It looks like AJ, you have an idea?
So I've had great mentors, and I have been a mentor to many people. So I think that everybody has to learn. Cross-cultural mentoring is good for everybody involved, right? Because I think we are able to develop close personal relationships that allow us to ask questions and see the world from each other's perspective. So I really definitely love that. And I think that none of us can survive without it. So DEI is not just about, people who are alike grouping together to address an issue. It really is. So I believe strongly in that. And I think that, first of all, we take each other at the human level, that at the level of our highest humanity and our greatest dignity. And we treat each other with dignity and respect. And in mentoring, we do that. I don't have to make it the first point of mentoring that I'm a person of color and you're not, or vice versa, right? We want to acknowledge that we have different cultural and social upbringings, that we have different lived experiences, and when you have people of color working in a majority community kind of organization, it's important for everybody to understand how things work, right? And as we mature as professionals, then we can all begin to understand how we can make things work better, how we can change and adjust. So, so for the person who says, I'm a white manager wanting to be creative with people of color on my team, first of all, I say, treat people of color with human dignity, period. Not as a separate kind of a person, but as somebody who has a different voice and a different perspective to bring to the table, so that everybody understands the common rules, and then together we can figure out how to change the rules to be more accommodating to a broader base of people.
And so let's also consider, do we want to be a mentor or a sponsor? And sometimes when people come to me, who are white and want to have a mentee of color, depending on what they say to me, I might suggest that they consider being a sponsor, because sometimes the language they use suggests, again, that, I'm better than, and let me kind of dip down and help, this person who doesn't have the privilege I have, and let me impart wisdom and experience and knowledge to help make them better. Well, a mentor is someone who provides advice and guidance and counsel and education. A sponsor is someone who uses their influence, their connections to connect a person to, opportunities that they might not have where they are. So that can be, groups that they're involved with, that can be clubs, that can be associations, that can be people that they know who are, high profile people or well-connected people. So, mentoring someone, giving them advice and counsel and helping them learn, and sponsor taking your, connections and elevating that person. And sometimes that's what someone needs. They just need that connection. They don't need you, to pat them on the head and say, listen, I can, impart some wisdom. Someone said to me last year, I promise nothing I say is anything made up for shock value. Someone said to me last year, she said, I really miss my white privilege, because it's not that easy to be in these conversations and realize, excuse me, the privilege that you have, and then realize you're seeing it kind of be pulled away. So, and one other quick thing I wanted to say to something AJ said a little earlier, and this would take it in a whole different direction, but I just want to put it out there. AFP and AABO and others are working on a fundraisers Bill of Rights. We have a donors Bill of Rights, and we care about how the donors feel and how the donors are treated. But a fundraisers Bill of Rights, we should be in a place where we are expecting to be treated a certain decent way. And we, as fundraisers, have too long accepted things because it's about that, support at the end of the day. And so we'll accept behaviors and being mistreated, disrespected, because at the end of the day, we want to, accept that contribution from the donor. So yes, hey Molly, yes, we're working on the fundraisers Bill of Rights. Stay tuned.
That's awesome. And thank you too for separating out that difference, the difference between mentoring and sponsoring. I think that I just want to say that I feel like is I've always myself not been keen on mentoring programs, mostly because they tend to be more like, I'm in a high level, I know a lot, I'm going to impart that wisdom to you. And when, frankly, a lot of those folks don't know very much about our experiences and the kinds of insight that we bring, and often aren't open to that. So I've been particularly interested in sort of joint mentoring programs where, it's mutual learning, and that those leaders do need to be humble and vulnerable and receptive of the leadership of others and the knowledge of others as well. So we have another question about this sort of difference in cultural differences. And so it's about whether white leaders can be the folks who select people of diverse experiences and build diversity if they actually are not necessarily culturally competent themselves. So what are some of the solutions you have seen to that problem?
Well, I think I wanted to jump in here. I think it's really important. You have to give people space to learn and change. And you can't presume that everyone is going to get it and be there right away. And so you might be in a situation where someone does not have the sensitivity or recognition, and you can help raise that, but you've got to give them the ability to change. And so don't completely disregard someone or eliminate them, based on something that has transpired. And that's a lot of weight on us, right, to raise that. And I've had to do it a lot in my career, and I think some of the panelists have as well. But those are just tools that you develop over time. And so, and you've got them if you're a fundraiser. It's really hard to close that gift. You've got to find alignment with those values between your organization and that donor to get them to commit to what you're going to do. This is kind of another application of something similar in my perspective. So, don't give up on that person. I think it's fantastic if you have a manager who sees this as woke and wants to make a change, but isn't really sure how to do that. And so that's when you can pull in either peers or a consultant or other resources to help bring that organization along.
I suggest the committee. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say I agree with you, and that there has to be that commitment from the leaders of the organization to really, not just the manager, but also just overall, that there's going to be a culture shift, and the leader has to kind of model it for everyone so that everyone can be held accountable. And I think that's for organizations that have people who want to make this change, I think if the leader really is on board and committed, then that change can really happen.
And so sometimes the leader thinks they're on board and they don't realize they're not. Sometimes before I will do a workshop on diversity and inclusion, I will ask if I can do a survey of the staff, and can it be an honest survey? And I recently did one that I did back in November. I hesitate to let the leader, it's anonymous, but I hesitate to let them see all the answers, because they usually get very upset because they think that they're leading, in a certain way, and they think that they're have this diversity mindset and they're embracing it. And then they read the feedback from their team and they're like, who is this monster that these people are talking about? This cannot be me. And I actually had one leader say, never mind, scrap this. I don't want to go this route. Let's go without the survey. And, a wonderful person, but that was problematic, because this is how your team is feeling, and these are the areas that need to be addressed, and this is all a part of it, and kudos to you for wanting to do it. But then, whoa, because you were exposed to it and didn't want to go down that road. So, and if talking to her, before the survey, she was 1,000% in. Post survey, she was wait, and I said, you might need this diversity training, my dear, before you open this up to your whole team. because you've got some work to do.
Yeah, I think there are uncomfortable conversations that have to be had, you know, so that's just a part of it. Yeah.
And you know, I think that for the person who said, if I'm white and I have to be the one to diversify the team, if you're the one whose job it is to hire the team, then you have to learn to be comfortable with this, right? I'm going to make a parallel that's not blatantly obvious, but I'll connect the dots. You know, when a job posting is placed, the data says that women will not tend to apply for the job if they don't have 100% of the qualifications. But men will apply if they have 60% of the qualifications. And a lot of the time, men get, you know, we hire people who don't have 100% of the qualifications all the time. And I think that when it comes to DEAI, that the parallel there is that, you know, if you have to hire people who culturally or socially are not what you typically are used, or people that you typically interface with, then you would ask yourself, well, where's the 60%? What is this person bringing to the table? You know, if it's something less than 100%, if you're only looking at the color of their skin, if you're only looking at the texture of their hair, then you have to start asking yourself, but what are her qualifications? What does she bring to this position? And so no one person typically has 100% of your desired qualities, but you have to focus on what they do bring. And I'm not saying, or even suggesting that when you are interviewing people of color, that you have to lower the bar, as Biggie expressed. I'm saying that you have to become aware of what is interfering with your ability to see this person as a qualified candidate. And it's probably not always how they look on paper, right? That you probably are responding to some preconceived notion of people who look like that or speak like that or whatever. So if you're white and it's your job to hire, then you must, of necessity, deal with the fact that you may be having biases, the fact that you may not fully understand what all this diversity, equity, and inclusion are, and then do what William said, is give yourself space to learn and change and grow, and give your team space to learn and change and grow, but always and consistently confirming and reaffirming that we are working and changing and growing. And then lastly, let that diverse staff have a clear clarion voice in the kinds of changes and modifications that will make the workspace a better and more equitable space for everybody, a more welcoming space for everybody, because people will tell you what they need and what they want to be, what they want to see be different.
So in that vein, how do you, what if that space doesn't exist where the staff has this clarion voice? I love it. What if you are working with a white leader who actually is under the impression that the organization is doing fine, it is diverse, but it clear, like you feel as an employee, it's not, and you, i.e., you know it's not. How do you manage up to that? Maybe William, you have some insight.
Yeah, that's a really tough situation because how do you get that person on board? And sometimes you can't. And so you have to recognize that. You have to decide whether it's an organization you want to stay within. You're not the knight in shining armor that can necessarily save the organization and take it forward. I mean, there are limits to what you're able to do. But a couple of tactics I think that can work well. One is, for example, at Space Center, we set up with a social justice and equity team that cuts across departments, where we have a variety of people and mixed races and ethnicities and backgrounds together, where we're talking about these issues and they're all kind of emissaries out into the organization. So one, the fact that that team exists creates visibility, and it underscores the importance and how we're walking the talk of our policy. And then also putting in place activities and programs to help create that community. Because I think what people recognize is we're really not all that different, and that we're aspiring for many of the same things in life. And often through familiarity, you can dispel a lot of misperceptions and prejudice. I'm not saying it's the panacea for everything, but you've got to have multiple strategies to address this within the organization. I think for someone who has a manager who doesn't really seem woke, you've got to look for other allies or influencers who are a peer to that manager to help have those conversations with that person, to help raise awareness and call attention to how it's holding back the potential of that organization. Because there's a lot of great research and documentation about how diverse organizations are more effective and productive in so many levels, from staff satisfaction to revenues to impact and fulfillment of vision. It's well documented, and that's why, honestly, the corporate sector embraces it, because it's about profits, right? And you're a for-profit entity, and they know, hey, this works. When you have different voices and approaches and ideas, you will have a more productive organization. But it really takes a tolerance to listen and the ability to listen and hear those different views and approaches and thoughts.
I love that idea of potentially setting up peer pressure for leaders. I think that there are a number of efforts, improvement efforts, that have worked because of that. Like, I think about the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, who built cohorts of other cities, city leaders, mayors, and whatnot, to elevate the conversation and work, essentially, results around race equity. And they get those folks all together. So if I'm a mayor of a city, I'm seeing my peers and colleagues doing this work and being lauded and being, visible and saying how important it is. I think that is a wonderful tactic for those leaders to see what is going on in their fields with their peers and colleagues.
Lisa, if I could jump in and just share, it's going to be announced in a week. And Houston, I'm on the board of directors of the Greater Houston Partnership, which is a combination of our Chamber of Commerce and International Chamber of Commerce. And it's an issue that we have taken very seriously. And I also serve on a racial equity task force, and we've created guidelines, racial equity guidelines for Houston and our members. And we already have nearly 120 companies who signed on to these racial equity guidelines. And they are very strong around expectations. And so we're taking a real stand in the city around, this is our baseline expectation of what you will do in the city of Houston if you're going to do business here in the corporate sector. And there are other cities that have done something similar. Cincinnati is one, actually, that is a stellar example, and many other across the country. But it is a really important step, and that's how you're going to create change. If you have major sectors that get on board, that all sign on to a document like this, this is one way that we are going to help create real change in society.
Beautiful. And so let's pivot for a moment. There's another question in chat, and Ellen wants us to discuss the importance of retention and give us examples from your experience. So I think, Birgit, you were talking about promotion. What other kinds of tactics do organizations need to be considering when they're thinking about retention?
I think professional development is a big one there. I mean, I think if people feel like they're cared for and invested in, and that they're needed and shown by their leaders that they're important. So I think professional development is a big one, in my opinion.
Not being made to feel like the only. So the thing is, when you are a person of color and you walk in the room, there's no way to hide from that. Anybody could have any other issues that they're dealing with that might not be, obvious, even if it's some kind of, drug or alcohol issue, unless weight. I mean, you walk in the door, people know, you got a weight issue, but, the color of your skin, all the arrows are pointing saying, Black person entering the room, and you can't hide from that. So being aware of that and sensitive to that, and that does not happen overnight. You know, I was with a group of people. We were having a Zoom happy hour and having a great, old, wonderful time. And we decided to gather again the following week. And somebody said, hey, everybody send in your baby picture. And, you know, we will put up all the baby pictures at the beginning of the meeting, and we'll have so much fun trying to figure out who's, you know, who. Well, I was the only Black person in the group. So I said, hey guys, that's going to be about 15 seconds of fun for me, because my picture is going to be there and everybody's going to go, oh, well, that's Birgit. And then they'll spend the rest of the time, you know, giggling and laughing, trying to figure out who everyone else is. But, you know, and I can participate in that part, but not the part where everybody's trying to figure out who I am. And so I'm not trying to, you know, crash anybody's party or say we can't have fun, have to worry about every single thing. But the result of that was, you know, 25 people going, oh, that had never occurred to us. And then they were mortified. I had text messages the rest of the day. I'm so sorry. Oh, we didn't mean to make you feel, you know, singled out. And I didn't want to make them feel bad. But the point is, we don't always think of that when we're not the only in the situation. So it can be as simple as, you know, when you all are planning to go to lunch, where you're going to lunch, or happy hour after work, where you have people who have families and they have to get home to meet the babysitter. And so they get left out and don't get to be a part of the gathering at, you know, Jimmy's, you know, whatever down the street, and end up getting left out. Or recognizing other, you know, religious recognitions when we think it's only one that we need to make sure that we don't schedule a meeting around. Or recognizing that not everybody eats meat. We have vegan. I mean, our thinking has to be beyond just what is the general majority of how everyone operates. And then people can come in and feel like they're a part of the group, a part of the team, and not singled out for what they bring that might be different. It can be celebrated.
Yeah.
And I think, oh, go ahead, AJ.
Well, I was just going to say it can be hard work, because you know what, we like a world where we all just know, you know, everybody's going to bring meat, potatoes, and salad to the potluck, you know, and then what do you do when somebody brings baklava, like something, you know, that you're not used to eating? We all want it to just be simple and easy, where we're not always feeling like we have to learn something new. When I was a young mother, you know, one of our part of a project I was part of, the lady taught us all, it's always going to be awkward until it gets easy. It's always going to be awkward until it gets easy. And so we have to kind of socially normalize the awkwardness that we're going to feel until we all learn to understand where each other is coming from and to respect each other. And I think that part of the pendulum swing that we've experienced in the last number of years is that people were sick of trying to get along, and they just wanted it to go back to the way it used to be, where we didn't have to guess what was acceptable and what was normal and what we were allowed to say and not allowed to say. But we're going to have to go through that until we get along. And you know, I think my favorite expression, my favorite saying around diversity, equity, and inclusion is, diversity is inviting different people to the dance, and inclusion is playing the music that makes them want to dance, right? Something's going to have to change. And it doesn't, you know, don't look at it just in, well, some people are just going to have to leave the party, because if you don't want to listen to the music I want to listen to, then you have to leave. I think that if we all stay in the party together, then we'll learn to like things about each other's music. And please know that that is a metaphor as much as it is literal. Learning to broaden what we understand is normal and acceptable. And it's going to be hard until it's easy. And it's never going to get easy if we all just walk away from the difficulty that it is. And then creative and brilliant minds, mind trusts like this call today, will have to come together and create the ways that we learn to live together more harmoniously.
Beautiful. So there's actually this whole thing that I wanted to do about promotions and whatnot, which I think would be totally interesting. But there's now a few more questions in chat. So I think the audience has the floor now. So let's answer a few. One is, what gets measured gets managed. So there's this saying. It seems every organization is trying to come up with metrics to measure progress around D&I and incentivize managers. So have you seen any metrics that are actually working and getting that right? Because they seem like there's some bad ideas, like quotas is a bad idea. What's a good idea?
So I'm not going to answer that question because I don't have the answer on that one, and I'll go down a rabbit hole of debate on that. But I will say one of the things that I wanted to note is that be careful of doing things for optics. So I get, and I'm not talking about, what Paul went through and how AJ got involved, because that was true partnership for diversity. And, so I won't go through that whole thing. What I'm talking about is when you want to invite someone to be a part, for the optics of it, and understanding that in reality, we don't always understand really 100% what diversity somebody brings to the table. So I actually am adopted. I was born in Germany. My birth father was from Barbados. My mother's German. So I'm not even African American. I identify as African American, but I'm German Bajan. So, and I get on a stage and I show my DNA, and I am 56% Western European. And so technically, based on that 56%, I'm white. So, I don't really bring the diversity in, what I'm made up of, but you see me, you make an assumption, and that's what you want, in terms of diversity. So I just caution to be careful when we're doing it, measuring it by the optics of how many, people do we see represented in this picture.
So thank you, Birgit. We have we have 3 more questions in the queue. I have 3 more of you panelists. So I'm going to lob a question to each of you, and then we will wrap up. So let's see. The next question is L. Santisananda. Do you see people of color candidates pitted against each other in internal hiring discussions? If not, then we'll pass it on to one of the others. But I'm guessing you probably have seen something.
So I'm sorry, candidates pitted against each other in a hiring?
So people of color, candidates who are people of color pitted against each other in internal hiring discussions.
Yeah, I think that I'll pass this one because I feel like it's definitely, I've seen it happen, but there might be some more other experiences that other folks can share.
What's bad about your experience to share?
Oh, no, nothing bad. I'm just saying that I feel like that it's something that it happens. And I do feel like, for me, it's never happened to me, but I've heard it happen to other folks. But I do feel, for me, I feel when I work in an organization, there aren't, in many organizations I've worked with, it's been mostly white with a few people of color that I really have bonded with, so for me, it's hard for me to relate to that. Like, I know it's happened to other folks, but for me, it's been, I feel like a sense of community more with the other folks of color that I work with. So that's why I'm passing it. It's more of like, Thank
you. No, that's great. Thank you. I wanted to make sure you didn't minimize your own experience, because it's very important. AJ or Birgit, do you have, or
yeah. So for me, it comes down sometimes to diverse pool versus diverse candidates. So sometimes, an organization will bring in a diverse pool so they can show, well, we had 8 finalists, and of the 8 finalists, 3 were people of color. And so then, it's like, we know that we're not going to, they know that they're not going to end up with 3 people of color vying for the top, to ensure that they're going to end up with a person of color. but they are sort of competing for that one spot that one diverse candidate is going to rise to. A diverse candidate, is someone who makes the cut, has the experience, is a prime finalist, and even though they are a person of color, it's not because they are, they happen to be qualified. I think that it's something that, the more training we go through, the more unconscious bias, awakening we have, the better that will get. But I think that it happens all around, and not just among white people who are doing the decision making.
Great, thank you. So the other question, one of the other questions is that, is it acceptable for me to reach out to a person of color to refer other people of color when my network is very, very white, or is that rude? So it sounds like, hey, if I know the one person of color in my network, is it rude for me to ask that person of color to find other people of color for my position?
Can I make a comment on this, Lisa?
Yeah,
just
Paul,
before the
okay.
panelists jump in, just really quickly. And it's funny, we did have to rewrite our job description, but I went to Lisa and I said, I can't put in this job description, I'm looking for a person of color, can I? I mean, I didn't even know that much, and she was like, yep, you can't actually do that. And so, but what she helped me do was shape a job description so that people of color knew that we were an inclusive and welcoming organization. So that there was language in there that it wasn't coded at all. It was just language that was much more inclusive and welcoming. So, but I was shocked by how many middle-aged white men applied for that job. Shocked. I forgot to tell you at the beginning too, we ended up not only hiring AJ, we also found another candidate who's amazing, and we hired her as well. So we found 2 out of this process, which was a great result. So anyway, I just wanted to jump in and talk about that job description in particular. But going back to the question about, is it okay to ask your Black friend about their network?
Can I just actually,
yes, Sunanda,
yeah, I just want to say that I think they should do the work and look at different networks, broaden your network, and not go to your only Black friend or your only friend of color and ask them. But I think, Paul, you had to do some work when you did that too. You did a lot of research, and I think it's good to put that work in, and it'll actually like broaden your network, which will be good for you as well. So I do feel like there's some work to be put in, and not putting the burden on, that one person. I think that's important.
Right, I agree.
I wanted to jump in and say that recruitment is perpetual, and don't wait until the point where you're trying to hire someone. Constantly be reaching out, exploring other networks, getting a sense of who is out there and what those opportunities are. So when you do have the space or the opportunity for someone, you can be really intentional in doing that recruitment. I think so often I've seen where people become very desperate and they say, oh, we've got to fill this position. We've got to have a diverse pool. Who do you know? How can we find people? You can't just turn it on like a spigot, right? You really should be constantly networking and identifying and looking at who is out there and who could be a great match for your organization, or where you could be a great match for that organization.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna, if I may, tell a personal story. I was one of 5 people of color in my high school, and I was a straight A student. I was on the National Honor Society, and I could speak French. I learned to speak French in high school, and then studied abroad to get better at it. And I remember one time I think I might have been a sophomore, and I went to my high school principal, and I told him, I want to work at the United Nations. I want to be able to use my ability to speak French and, my good grades, and I want to work in an international kind of a community. And my principal, who was himself white, he said, oh, Audrey, you'll be able to do that. He said, I just know that you'll be able to have that kind of career. And do you know why? And I said, well, because I'm a straight A student and I'm National Honor Society and blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, because you're Black. And he said, you know, right. And he said, you'll be able to open doors because you're Black, and they're going to want Black people who can do these kinds of things. And I felt in that moment, it was an unforgettable moment for me, because I felt like everything about me had just in that one sentence been reduced to the fact that I was Black. And but then as an adult, and this goes to AADO, when I read, I have a business, so I do consulting around the country, and I was actually building my case file when I found the AADO announcement about the position with Creative Fundraising Advisors, and I read it, and it was clear that, first of all, because they had advertised through AADO that they were looking for people of color, and also the way the job description was worded. But I had a moment of absolute personal pride, if I can use that word, because when I read the job description, this was one where I knew I was 100% qualified. And the fact that I was a person of color gave me in that moment a sense of, okay, they are looking for me. They want me, not somebody like me, not somebody else who can do like me. And so this kind of went to that question: do people of color, are we pitted against one another? And I would say no more than in any competitive situation, right? You're always in competition with, you know, you have 10 people for one open position. But there are times when everything about who we are lines up and makes us the perfect person for the position. Not because I'm a Black woman, but that didn't hurt me in this instance, right? Not because you know, I was always a Dean's List student and a straight A student, not because of my 30 years of experience, but everything about me came together in this one instance where I could say, they need me, right? Not somebody like me. So I feel like when we're talking about working with people of color, yes, we're being deliberate in this instance to be more inclusive. But I think, again, it's not about their color. It's not about their country of origin. It's about the person as much as it is about the demographic box that they may tick off in your search. It's about the qualities that they develop, and it's about them allowing us to bring our whole person to a position. And then once we're in, then we can start to have conversations of how can we make this more of a level playing field? How can we make this more of a welcoming environment? So the issues are to treat people with human dignity, treat people based on the content of their character, in addition to all the other beautiful richness that we bring from our lived experiences as people of color or women or people of the LGBTQ+ community, because it all matters. It matters as much for me as it matters for Paul and his life, and William and his life, and Sunanda and her life, and Brigitte with your multicultural background. So everybody matters.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say very quickly that I've got 20 requests in my inbox for people looking for people of color, right? A network of 3,000 members and 90% are people of color. But we do have a screening program that is a fee-based, a very small fee-based for people who, and a database of over 200 people of color looking for leadership roles. So, you know, reach out to us and we'll help you identify 2 or 3 candidates.
So
I also wanted to say there was a question in the chat about the job description that Lisa helped me with, and I'm happy to, if you email us at info@creativefundraisingadvisors.com, we can send you a copy of the job description. I can tell you that right up front it says what we were looking for, and then it says Creative Fundraising Advisors is seeking a dynamic, focused, race equity-oriented individual who can join our team. And we talk in the job description about, you know, we're taking steps to build our capacity to better serve our clients who are addressing issues around race equity. So we put it right up front, but then we also made sure in the job description when we talked about us as a company, we put our values in our job description. We put the kind of that we believe in diversity and inclusion are critical to strong partnerships and better business relationships. So we were very upfront about who we were as an organization as well. I'm happy to share that with members, the people who are attending this as well, if you'd like.
And I just want to make a little twist there that this was, we were also trying to make sure that AJ's expectations were managed well. So what organizations will often do is say, hey, we're big equity, oriented organizations. We've been doing this work forever, and set themselves up sometimes for a significant disappointment for people of color who are coming in expecting, the wokeness to be right there for you. So we did our best also to manage that, knowing that that Creative Fundraising Advisors is on a path, on a journey. It's the beginning of their journey. And so, yeah, big thing. One quick last question in the chat Q&A. Do you have specific recommendations or suggestions when trying to recruit for entry and mid-level development positions? So we've been talking a lot about folks with experience. What if they don't have a lot of experience? Any very quick things that you can suggest? Anything that's different? Oh, go ahead, Paul.
I always say to people, none of us came to fundraising on purpose, right? We all kind of fell into this job because, I was trained as a classical musician. I had no idea. My first job was as a grant writer. I fell into this job by mistake, but I had the qualities that make up a good fundraiser, right? And I know that my colleagues on this call also have those qualities. So it's about recognizing the qualities, not necessarily recognizing the experience. And then it goes back to the conversation about sponsoring or mentoring. And then you recognize the qualities and give people the room and the opportunity to grow. That's, from my perspective, how you do that.
Could I jump in with a couple of practical things? One is volunteer. Actually go to a nonprofit organization and say you want to volunteer in their membership department or fundraising department. At the Space Center, for example, we have volunteers who help sell memberships. We train them to do that. And if we see somebody who's a real star, let's say, hey, there could be an opportunity for us on our team. The other is to do informational interviews. Reach out to people who work in the kind of job you hope to have one day in advancement and say, would you give me 20 minutes or half hour of your time to tell me about your career and how you got started and what you're doing? And I guarantee that if you have any kind of synergy with that person, he or she will say, hey, I think you've got a lot of potential. Let me introduce you to someone. Or I know about this opportunity, or this is something that you could do. So I would say volunteer and informational interviews.
I say reach out to an organization where you are passionate about the work they're doing. And it's probably not going to be higher ed, but I'm talking about a smaller or mid-size if you're looking for entry level, because nothing is more exciting than having a fundraiser who really cares and is passionate about what's happening. You can sell that getting up and going to bed. So you will be able to convince them that you can do that. And you would be able to have conversations with prospective donors that some of the fundraisers can't have.
So I just want to wrap up because we're right at the half-hour point here. I first want to thank this unbelievable panel. I have been deeply moved actually by everything that we talked about today, and I think it was a very rich conversation. We've already had one person say, "Hey, can we do another one of these?" because it was so good. So I want to thank you, and I'm honored actually that you did this for us. And so let's do it again. The other thing I wanted to say is I have a very wise colleague who I work with very closely, and we do planning together. And she always says that this is like going to the gym. You can't go to the gym once and expect to have a great body, right? You got to go to the gym over and over and over again. You have to actually do, muscle confusion. You have to do different things, whatever. In order to get better, you have to keep working out. It's exactly like this. You have to keep working at it. This is not going to be a quick solution to this problem. You got to keep going to the gym. And then finally, I wanted to say we do have some tip sheet that we're going to distribute to all of the panelists who were here. So look for that in your email. We will send that as a follow-up to the panel. And Again, thank you so much. And again, thank you all for your participation. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Meet you all. It's great. Bye.